Hi everyone, today we're going to be looking at the options lab in the app development with Swift textbook. So let's get started. Imagine you have an app that asks the user to enter her name, her age rather, using the keyboard. When the app allows a user the input text, what is captured for you is given in a string. However, you want to store this information as an int. Is it possible for the user to make a mistake and for the input to not match the type you want to score? Of course. So declare a constant user input age and type string and assign it 34e to simulate a typo while typing age. Then declare a constant user age of type int and use the int initializer and pass the user input age. What error do you get? So let's have a look here. So let user input age be of type string, and we're going to give it a value of 34e, and we're going to also create var user age of type int. Great. And essentially what we want to do here is we're going to say user age equals int user input age, right? So we're taking user input age and we're putting in user age. We should get an error saying that it can do that. Value of optional type int, not unwrapped. Did you mean to put a question mark to make it optional? So that's the error we get. So I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. Go back and change the type of user age to int question mark. Great. And we're gonna start with nil here, and print the value of user age. What is the user's age value? Why is the user age's value nil? Provide your answer in a comment or print a statement below. So let's have cannot user age int. Sorry. So that's how you change it. Now we've made it of type int. So let's go ahead back. Why is user age value nil? Provide your answer. Okay, so now if we try this, if we go user age equals int user input age, and we print user age, we should get nil. The reason it's nil is because Swift couldn't convert 34e to a integer, therefore it left it as nil or empty, right? That's essentially the reason, right? So try to convert 34e into an integer and it couldn't do that, so it left it as nil. That's why it didn't actually do any unwrapping. All right, moving on here. It says now go back and fix the typo on the value of user input age. Is there anything about the value printed that seems off? Print user age again, but this time unwrap user age using a bang operator. So let's go ahead and change this from 34e to just 34, and it'll print out optional 34. So is there anything funny? Yes, it has the word optional, and it says print user age again, except this time using a bang operator. So let's do this. Print user age, and we're going to use the bang operator or the exclamation mark, and it'll just say 34. Now use optional binding to unwrap user age. So essentially, just to let you know, this is force unwrapping something or using the bang operator, the exclamation mark. So this will actually force unwrap it and just make it a 34, whereas when we're doing this, it's an optional 34. You have to understand something. When you get an optional, type here, you can't do any actually arithmetic operations to it, so it's sort of useless, to be honest. And you can't do this either, although this works sometimes, but this is super unsafe. You don't want to do that. So the proper way of doing it is using what we call optional binding. Okay, to do optional binding, you use an if let. So if let statement, so temp user age equals user age, I'll show you what this means in a sec, and we're gonna print temp user age. And this will give us 34, and we could do arithmetic operations on this. So essentially this right here is the same as this, gives us the same result, except this is super unsafe, this is safe. And what this does is, this if let statement is saying, listen, go ahead and create this temporary constant called, I called it temp user age, you could call whatever, and store whatever's in here, in there, if you can. If you can't, then none of this will execute, like whatever's in here won't execute inside the curly braces. But if you can put a value in here, then go ahead and execute the body of the if statement, and essentially here I'm just using print. All right, pretty easy stuff. All right, moving on to page 2. All right, page number 2. Okay, so many APIs that give you information gathered by the hardware return optionals. For example, an API for working with a heart rate monitor may give you nil if the heart rate monitor is adjusted poorly and cannot properly read the user's heart rate. Declare a variable heart rate of type int optional and set it to nil. Print the value. So var heart rate of type int optional, and we're gonna set it to nil, and we're gonna say print heart rate, and it should print out nil. Great. In this example, if the user fixes the position of the heart rate monitor, the app may get a proper heart rate reading. Below, update the value of heart rate to 74, print the value. So heart rate equals 74, and we're gonna print heart rate now, and it should print out 74. Optional 74 rather, because we didn't unwrap it. Great. As if you've done in other apps, create a variable called heart rate average. So var hr average, and it's of type int. So of type int, and use the values stored below and the value of heart rate to calculate an average heart rate. So check this out. So hr average equals HR1 plus HR2 plus HR3 plus HR4 plus our heart rate that we created up there, which has 74, and we're going to divide the whole thing by 5. Cool. And then it says and calculate the average. Okay, and then print heart rate average, print HR. It's giving me an error, it's not even letting me do this, but essentially the error is saying that, listen, we can't actually do any arithmetic operations on this. All right, so it says it's ready, but it's not allowing me to actually continue with this because there's an error here, because it's saying, listen, this thing right here is an optional, I can't do any arithmetic operations on this, which makes sense. So if you didn't unwrap the value of heart rate, you've probably noticed that you cannot perform mathematical operations on an optional value. You will first need to unwrap heart rate. Safely unwrap the value of heart rate using optional binding. If it has a value, calculate the average heart rate using the value and the older heart rate stored above. If it doesn't have a value, calculate the average heart rate using only the older heart rate. In each case, print the value of HR average. Okay, so how do we do that? It's actually pretty simple. We're just going to use what we call optional binding using an if let. So if let, I'll explain what I'm doing here. Temp heart rate equals heart rate. Then we're going to actually copy and paste this so I don't have to retype it. Boom. Else we're going to go pretty much this minus this thing right here, and we're only going to be dividing by 4. Okay, so what did we just do here? So essentially we're saying, listen, make a real quick check if this thing has a value, because we don't know if this thing has a value or not, because this is of type optional. If this thing has a value, go ahead and unwrap the value of this thing and put it in temp heart rate. And when you put it in temp heart rate, there we go, that's there. When you put in temp heart rate, go ahead and add these values, and including temp heart rate, and divide by 5. Else, that means if it didn't have a value and you didn't put in temp heart rate, go ahead and execute this line. Essentially add these 4 and divide by 4. And now if we print HR average, it should say 75. Great. And that's essentially it, because it executed this line. If I go ahead and go up here and essentially change this to 0, or rather, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and comment this out. Okay. If I go ahead and comment this out, you'll see that it doesn't print out. Well, what happened here? There's an error? No, there's no error. So essentially, it doesn't execute this, and it executes this thing right here, in which case the average is 76, whereas here the average was not 76, the average was 75. So here it's executing this line. If this thing is nil, it'll be executing this line right here. All right, let's move on to page 3. All right, page 3. If an app asks for a user age, it may be because the app requires a user to be over a certain age to use some of the services it provides. Write a function called checkAge that takes one parameter of type string. The function should try to convert this parameter into an int value and then check if the user is over 18 years old. If he/she is old enough, print welcome. Otherwise, print sorry, you're not old enough to use the app. If the string parameter cannot be converted into an int value, print sorry, something went wrong. Can you please re-enter your age? Call the function and pass in user input age below as a single parameter. Then call the function and pass in a string that can be converted to an integer. Okay, let's have a look at how to do this. So at first, this sounds like a mouthful, but I'll guide you through it. So we're going to create a function called checkAge, and it's going to take in a string. I'm going to call this label age, and that's essentially it for now. Let's have a look here. The string, the function should try to convert it. Okay, cool. So what we're doing is we're doing if let, I'm gonna call this temp age equal age int age. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the string age, whatever they're putting, I'm converting to an integer, and I'm trying to option bind it and convert it and put it in temp age. And then if that happens, I'm gonna go take that number and compare temp age, and I'm saying, well, is temp age greater than or equal to 18? Because that's what it's telling us, right? If so, print out the word welcome. If not, so else, we're gonna print out the words you're not old enough, right? That's what they told us to do. Else, so all of this happens if there is actually a number, right? So if I could actually take in the string age and convert it into a number and put it in temp age. So that's what this is. But if I can't do any of this, at all, I'm gonna print out, what did it say? Sorry, something went wrong, right? Sorry, something went wrong. Please re-enter your name again, right? And that's essentially it. So then call the function. Okay, so let's go ahead and call the function here. So the function is called checkAge, and the string we're going to put in is the user input age, that says 34E, and it should print out, sorry, something went wrong, because it can't actually convert it. If I go ahead and delete the E and now it can convert it, it says welcome, because obviously 34 is over 18. But if I change it just to 4, which is under 18, it says you're not old enough. So that's pretty much how to do that. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, go back and update your function to return the age as an integer. Will your function always return a value? Go back and update your function to return the age as an integer. Will your function always return a value? Make sure your return type accurately reflects this. Call the function and print the return value. Okay, so essentially what we do is instead of having a void function here, we're gonna give it a return value, and since it won't always return something, it has to be optional. And we got to return here a few things. The first is after this first if let statement, and we're going to return temp age, and here at the end of this if statement, we're going to be returning nil, right? So essentially, if this if statement occurs, we're going to return temp age, which is whatever the age is, 34 in this case. If this happens, which means we couldn't really convert the number because it was 34E or something, we're going to just return nil. It's as simple as that. Okay, so go back and update the function, Will your function always return a value? Make sure your return type accurately. Call the function and print the return value. So let's go ahead and call the function check age, and we're going to put in user input age, which is right here at 34. I'm going to change this to 34R, for example. It should print something went wrong. If I actually want to print out the optional number as well, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to go user input. So I'm just going to print out the whole function. So it returned nil here because this is 34R. If I actually change that to 34, it'll print optional 34. So it's actually printing out the actual number, but doesn't always print out the number. So remember that when you're returning you're creating a function that has a return value and it might not return something, make sure you make it an optional. All right. Okay. Imagine you are creating an app for making purchases. Write a function that will take the name of an item for purchase and will return the cost of that item. In the body of the function, check to see if the item is in stock by accessing it in the dictionary stock. If it is, return the price of the item by accessing it in the dictionary prices. If the item is out of stock, return nil. Call the function and pass in string that exists in the dictionaries below. Print the return value. Okay, not so hard. So I'll explain what I'm doing here in a sec. But let's go ahead and create a function called check price, and this function is going to take an item of type string, and it's going to return a double of type optional. Why double? Because prices are in double, not int. And we're going to do a simple if let temp temp stock, I guess I could call it, temp stock equals stock item. Then go ahead and if temp stock is greater than 0, then go ahead and return prices item. Awesome. If not, else return nil. And what we have here is this thing right here. This closes this. Else return nil. Okay, so that should get rid of this return problem. There we go. Okay, so what did I do here? I created a function called check price, and it's taking a string and it's returning a double. So the first thing we're doing is we're actually doing some optional binding here. So this thing, the string, we have to check, right? So what we're doing is we're looking at stock. So stock is a dictionary, and we're looking at item. So item is a string. So we're searching stock if the string that the end user gives us exists in here, in one of these. We're going in and we're saying, okay, listen, what item is this? So it's gonna say, oh, for string chips, it has 4, right? So this is called a key, and this is a value. So it has 4, it has 0, it has 12. So temp stock is actually an int. So if I click option and I hover over it, and it tells you that this constant is of type int. So we're taking in the string, and we're looking at the number associated with that string and storing it in temp item. And then we're checking, is that number greater than 0? If it is, return the prices for that string. So remember, item is that string, right? So if, let's say we use chips, it says 4. Is 4 greater than 0? Yes. If it is, take chips and go put it in this, go check it in this dictionary, and figure out what the number is. And then we're returning prices item. We're returning the number associated with that key. In this case, chips. Otherwise, return nil if we can't find it in the stocks at all. So if someone puts in on a watermelon, well, watermelon's not here, it won't put it in. So this whole if statement is if we could actually properly option unbind. Otherwise, if the whole thing just doesn't work at all, then we just return nil. So let's go ahead and check this, okay? So check price, and we're gonna put in string chips. It has to be identical, so uppercase C, chips, and it should return the 299. And surely enough, it returned 299. I could obviously print this whole function to see if it works or not, and it should print 299 here at the bottom. Printed 299 exactly, with a whole bunch of zeros at the end, and that's essentially it. All right, you could change chips to anything here. Let's go ahead and say juice, and it'll work, and juice should say 399. If we put something that's a 0, so donuts, so we don't have stock in donuts, it should return nil. Perfect. Moving on to the next page.